Hi and welcome. I'm Andi Mioč and you are watching Context. Investment has become the name of the game when it comes to China's presence in Central Asia, especially Kazakhstan. With infrastructure loans already amounting to nearly $9 billion, the official figures say that the worth of long-term joint projects could translate to $60.5 billion. Unlike the traditional U.S. approach of dispensing aid towards the media and civic groups, funds from Beijing are coming in form of loans and joint projects primarily aimed at development of energy, infrastructure and industry. Back in November, Astana and Beijing signed agreements worth $2.5 billion on expanding cooperation with the intention of doubling their trade turnover further down the line. With some 5,000 joint ventures operating in Kazakhstan and given its position in the Greater Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, let's talk how much Astana is vital to Beijing's economic ambitions and how much of an equal partner it truly is. Joining us live from Almaty is international relations expert Nurbalat Nishimbayev, while political analyst Onur Erim is coming to us from Istanbul. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. First off, Nurbalat, how do you see the Chinese investments in the country with Beijing holding a large amount of debt, but on the other hand also developing Kazakhstan's infrastructure?
Actually, since quarantine, since the COVID-19, Kazakhstan and the Chinese investment project and economic relations has been expanded. But however, since America's shutdown of the USAID and many other aid project, Chinese role is expanding. But the straightforward answer to the question, China is able to replace USA. Of course, Chinese aid is much more smaller than the US. But however, for long term, Chinese presence in Kazakhstan will definitely rise. There are two reasons. The first is, of course, logistics. China considers Kazakhstan as a door to the Europe, with the land by Caspian and the Trans-Caspian corridor. The second is China have introduced 2013 One Belt, One Road initiative. Within this framework of this initiative, China and Kazakhstan has able to join joint project. So therefore, Chinese project, at least for now in Kazakhstan, is running in economy, in infrastructure. The big question is still coming, to what extent will be ideological aspect Kazakh-Chinese relations for the long term. That is the question for the upcoming decades, I think.
Onur, what's your take on China funding projects in Kazakhstan? Here Nurbalat mentioned USAID withdrawing and pausing all aid. What's your take on China giving money in forms of loans and joint projects in Kazakhstan?
Well, I think we should take a look at this, as you said, or the example of Kazakhstan, but I think we should look at this from a broader perspective, where with President Trump taking the seat over in the White House, as he has many times mentioned that in his first tenure, in his first term as the president, he has definitely shown a very concrete step towards this. He's really considering China to be probably the number one trade, so to speak, trade competitor in the world. So it looks like Trump this time as well will actually implement many measures trying to overcome those areas and those regions where Chinese have picked up a lot of ground around the world and try to compete with that and overcome that. Now, of course, China, for a number of reasons, one being their economy and their debt not being at an ideal level as well, are also shifting the way they are investing in and around the world, in and around sectors, and in and around countries. Hence, I think we're going to see more and more robust moves by either side in the trade war around the globe. and we're going to, I think, see even more, so to speak, Western-like investments by China or Western-like approaches by China, rather than their traditional approach that we have seen for the last few decades.
Nurbalat, how is Beijing's funding perceived by the general public in the country? Are there fears that some of the debt might be called in for political favors or gain?
Definitely, Chinese activity in Kazakhstan rising the public awareness towards China. When we talk about Chinese presence in Kazakhstan, we should take into account the Soviet Union cases, Soviet Union period, because older generation in Kazakhstan, mostly they have such a kind of xenophobic vision, Chinese people, because during the USSR time we have had some negative view about the Chinese. But in the last 30 years, we have seen the rise trade relations between not only state to state, but people to people. So we have numerous persons in Kazakhstan who has entrepreneurs who has a small business who runs direct trade with the Chinese colleagues. So therefore, time by time, Kazakhstani public is accepting normal way Chinese presence in Kazakhstan like used to be. So therefore, I think from the Chinese perspective, they should pay attention to the image. What they mean when they give the loans, what's the Chinese role, what's their vision about the financial loans, etc. So surely in the last 20 years in Kazakhstan, if we compare America, United States and Russia and the Chinese presence in Kazakhstan public perception, one of the weakest, one of the passive vision was from Chinese aspect. I think now is the time to see out of scope, to think out of boxes, what is the real face of China and what they want, what's their vision in general perspective. So therefore, Kazakhstan is also, generation is changing. We have been witnessing a new generation who was born after the independence, who has very different vision comparing to the older generation. So therefore, Chinese presence surely rise. Also, not only Kazakhstan, we have seen some not positive cases, Chinese presence in Tajikistan, Chinese presence in Southeast Asia. So therefore, surely we in public should be discussed openly about their steps and what they are looking for and their main core values.
Well, sticking with this image on the global scene, Onur, would you say that Beijing has taken some measures to alleviate these fears that such infrastructure loans could be called in? Do they have strategies for doing so? We've seen them investing in the Southeast Europe, for example, in Greece, in the Western Balkans nations with EU expressing some concerns.
Of course, and I believe this is an ongoing problem, if not a growing problem for China. Me personally have actually witnessed in a number of African nations where Chinese, although comparatively new to those markets, are not really, they're very skeptical, even though they're just, rather than, compared to our region, our relations, anybody in Central Asia, their relations, they're brand new, but they're also very looked at with a very big scope of skepticism. Now, this does show that for whatever reason, there's a number of reasons. I know we don't have the time to go into detail, but there's a number of reasons why China's involvement, Chinese investments, Chinese lending are still raising some eyebrows. People are still skeptical. Now, there's again, a number of reasons for that. And if China wants to be able to really be a worldwide player, playing by the rules of the international investment, international trade, and all that, I think China also needs to revisit how they approach these countries, how they approach to the international scene, because this will actually have China lose a lot of ground, which in some African countries they have been for the last couple of years. Again, this is a challenge for them. To be honest with you, their internal, their domestic debt is not helping the situation either. And of course, Trump's very, very aggressive approach in the trade war against China is not going to help them either. So China needs to really get more innovative, more robust, if China wants to be able to expand on the international trade and international business scene. That's the way I see it, at least from the perspective of what I see in most of the African nations where Chinese have investment.
Let's go back to this specific example of Kazakhstan. Nurbulat, how would you describe Astana's approach to Russia and the West now when it comes to its economy, given its ever closer ties with Beijing?
Surely, Astana, since 1991, is considering China as a counterbalance toward Russia, counterbalance toward USA. But however, since the start of serious than ever before. So therefore, this time, Astana and the Beijing relations as taking a new shape, taking a new stage. One of the greatest example was the initiation of the One Belt, One Road initiative in Astana. It was a very symbolic moment because Xi Jinping visited to Astana, Nazarbayev University, and declared One Belt, One Road initiative one of the strategic and logistical project which links Europe and China by the land of Kazakhstan. Now, Kazakhstan sees China even more important partner in this region. But how some certain lessons, which my colleague said, Chinese existence in Africa, in many other aspects, Kazakhstan, I think, in particular Astana, should take into consideration not repeat again those mistakes we had in other region or in other part of the world trading with China. But however, when we talk about Chinese presence in Kazakhstan in general, Chinese philosophy towards financial investment and the others are quite different than the Western. We know from the history when we made a business, when we get aid from the Western, one of the main criteria was the democracy, liberal ideas, creating inclusive society. When we trade with Chinese government, usually they don't require such a kind of requirements, open transparency in government, etc., etc. So I think that will be one of the differences of Chinese existence in Kazakhstan, including in Central Asia. But however, in international relations, in the last couple of years, we have seen Chinese trap diplomacy, financial trap diplomacy, that's becoming quite popular across the globe. I think that would be even better when we look at Chinese philosophy towards financial policies. But to be short, Kazakhstan started even more serious Chinese vector of their foreign policy because Kazakhstan historically had held multi-vector foreign policy. One of the eastern vector was China. I think it's a time to rise back Chinese vector in order to keep the balance in the region.
Well, with Kazakhstan's natural geographic position and its role in connecting the goods coming from China with Europe and beyond, Onur, with these circumstances, could Astana count on being regarded as an equal partner here?
Unfortunately, especially in the last couple of decades, geopolitics and the trajectory of where the international policies go do overcome, financial and business ties and agreements. I could give you many examples of that. So, and I make the same comment in Turkey, and I will do the same for any other of the brotherly nations, of any of our brothers across the board, especially that right now, unfortunately, we're at such a stage in the world, we must make sure that any kind of a foreign agreement is tied upon on factual basis, because if you just go by business contracts, very, very, very quickly, overnight, they will not recognize it. They will do whatever they need to so to speak, to twist your arm. So China, I would say Kazakhstan, for Kazakhstan, it's no exception. So I would always expect the worst and be prepared for the worst, and then just hope for whatever is the best. I mean, let's not forget, giving a very, very, very clear example from Turkey. For example, the United States, against US laws, against international trade laws, have actually embezzled more than close to $1.5 billion of Turkey's money on the F-35 plane program. So why? No business reason at all. There is not one single reason. There is not one single case that is against US law or international law, because they just like it wanted that way for political reasons. So we have to be very careful that any of the commitments that we make are not at all would be obstacled by any changes in international diplomacy, by any changes in the trajectory of how especially the regional ties are going. Of course, Kazakhstan is in a place, in a geographical place, pretty much between China and Russia. So it's always going to be a hot water for Kazakhstan. So Kazakhstan has to make sure that it has a very balanced and very sound policy in all of its international involvements, even in investments, and make sure that Kazakhstan always has the upper hand, because otherwise it would be devastating and loss of a lot of money and hopefully nothing else if we acted otherwise. So we just have to make sure that Kazakhstan always has the upper hand in any kind of an international deal, because believe you me, it would just take a decision overnight, if not less time, by Chinese or the Russian or otherwise, to devastate the investment process that where others are involved, anybody but other than the government of Kazakhstan.
Nurbulat, would you say that Kazakhstan is able to have the upper hand, as Onur said, but not only Kazakhstan, but also the countries in the broader region of Central Asia?
Sure. Central Asian countries this time situation in a transformative situation, I would say, because since January, numerous concerns from the Washington regarding the region. Central Asia became a very important region for the global politics. I think in the upcoming years it will take even new shape, because still we don't have got what the Trump administration, how they see Central Asia. Still they haven't made any announcement, any programs regarding the Central Asia. But in the last 4 years, America's presence was quite passive in the region. But Central Asian countries now they're thinking much more about the inner unity. They have the system C5+1 in the last since 2007. I think Central Asian countries, they should care about it, regional unity. It's very important for them, at least to, when negotiate with external actors, they have common vision regarding the regional security. Because the region, the state, for the sake of the regional stability, those kind of system C5+1, it should be very important. Upcoming summer in Astana, expected to have a meeting, C5 plus China. Such a kind of platform, I think, will create common visions from Central Asian countries regarding not only China, but any other external players in the region for the long term.
Well, when it comes to regional cooperation, we just saw the border agreement between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. Some say it could pave the way for a Central Asia zone similar to Schengen. Onur, would you say that could happen, and what could it bring for the region?
Of course, these are, when you consider these things, these are definitely could be very advantageous for the participants, for sure. It could definitely enhance a lot of things, not just business, but other ties as well. However, let's not forget, any kind of a formation like this will probably be viewed as a threat, mostly by the US. And sometimes by UK, and definitely EU will not be any exception to that. So again, what can be very, very good, what could have very, very good outcomes, could be a threat to other, unified bodies around the world. And especially, we know how United States acts on things that they don't have control. UK does, usually the same thing, and EU usually follows it. So as long as, and these things will impose a threat to others, to other, large nations like United States, like United Kingdom, and to other already established, unified bodies like EU. So I think we should assess, although by idea, it would be a very, very advantageous for all the participants. We should also assess what will be the damaging side of such actions. We have to have a very balanced road, and maybe sometimes, wait for things to kind of mature. So do it at the right time, because timing in these things is at least as important as the events themselves. So I know maybe I'm not answering your question directly, but it's not really a yes or no answer. When done, if done, it would be a great asset to all the participants. But as well, we must not forget, we should really make sure that the timing is right for such an action where there's little or damaging attacks by those who will be threatened by such unification or such common efforts by other countries and in different regions.
Nurbulat, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. What could the Central Asia zone bring, not only for the cooperation within the region, but also the relations with China, the United States, and other global players?
Yes, in the last 30 years, since the collapse of the USSR, mostly politicians tried to create kind of common ground for Central Asian states, such a kind of institution without external players. But still, we haven't achieved kind of alternative of the European Union, kind of Central Asian without Russia and China. All the unions in Central Asia with China or Russia or Western participants. There were many reasons. One of the reasons were kind of competitiveness among the political leaderships between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan in the early 90s. But however, this time, Central Asian unity is coming to the new stage and is even important than ever before. Because Central Asian unity important for two reasons. The first one, all the time, great players, let's say, external political centers, they try to use some states for their own interests in order to put against one another. But however, for the region is very important, in particular to China, to have a common vision. China will sharing the border with Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan. Not only two states not sharing border directly with China, but it doesn't mean there is no influence of China. Chinese influence is expanding in the region. Time by time, it will only accelerate, only increase. So therefore, the number one question for the politicians of Central Asia is to have a groundbreaking conceptual view on China from the region. What, at least to draw kind of red line to keep for the long term. Because as my colleague said, no one knows what will come in the future, what the rule of the international law and regulation. So therefore, all the time, Central Asian states must make sure any changes, any kind of unexpected changes from the eastern neighbors.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us and offering your insights and opinions.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
And thank you for watching. That's all we had for you in this edition of Context. Stay tuned to A News.